A new survey from Deloitte found that confidence among city finance chiefs began to wane again over the second quarter of the year as market volatility, global fiscal tightening measures and the sovereign debt crisis weighed heavily on sentiment. It's now at a 12-month low. The survey polled 125 CFOs, including 32 from FTSE 100 companies, and only 24% said they're optimistic. That's down from 40% in the last quarter. 38% of them are worried about a double-dip recession, a significant jump on the 33% average chance predicted in the first quarter of the year. Even with all the pessimism, there is one bright spot. Sentiment on the availability of credit rose to its highest since Deloitte began the survey back in 2007. Right, joining us to discuss all this, Ian Stewart, Chief Economist at Deloitte. Hi, Ian. Thanks for joining us today. So, financial optimism at a 12-month low, more and more thinking we're going to have a double dip. That's pretty gloomy stuff.
They have become more gloomy. I think the environment is one where they're worrying about the effects of fiscal tightening at home. They're seeing the effects of instability in financial markets overseas, and the inventory cycle seems to be rolling over. So there are a series of factors which I think are weighing on confidence.
Fiscal tightening, many say yes, in the short term that's bad, but funnily enough, in the long term, there's a bit of light, isn't there?
There is, yes. What we found was that around about a third of CFOs thought that in the long term their companies would see benefits from fiscal tightening in the form of less red tape and lower tax rates. So there is some optimism out there. Although I would also say that around about two-thirds of them don't expect to see benefits and see negatives for their business in the short term from fiscal tightening.
One of the interesting elements is credit, because sentiment, as I said in the introduction about the availability of credit, reached the highest level since you started the survey in 2007. Does that tell us that credit is more available, or they're more optimistic about the availability of credit?
Well, this is a very interesting finding, because in an otherwise somewhat downbeat survey, there is really quite a pronounced improvement taking place in the perceptions of credit availability and the cost of credit. So we can't measure how available it is, but we can ask them how attractive they see bank credit, and actually bank credit is now viewed by CFOs as being as attractive as it was before the recession, before the credit crunch. And credit availability and costing is back to levels of 2007. So I think what this does suggest is that the gradual process of a repair in the banking system is starting to feed through to an improvement in credit supply, at least for larger corporates. And these are the top end of the UK corporate sector we're surveying here.
Another interesting element is that CFOs are now prioritising expansionary policies, even though they're saying the economy could slip into a double-dip recession. Yes. How do you work that one out?
Well, this is intriguing. I mean, their top priority is cost control. And what's been interesting for the last 2.5 years is that these guys have said cost control is what running the business is all about, which I think is understandable. It's striking that the economy's been growing for at least 2 quarters, and they're still focused on cost control. What's happened, though, is that more expansionary strategies like expanding into new markets and capex have moved up the league table of priorities pretty sharply. And the other thing is that cash flow, which has been a central preoccupation of companies through the recession, has dropped down the league table. So I guess this fits with a picture of an improved credit supply. The liquidity crunch, which we saw last year, has really abated, but they are still very worried about the risks of a double dip, and that means they're keeping a firm eye on cost control.
Ian, thanks for joining us today. Ian Stewart there, Chief Economist at Deloitte.